All right.
I'm on the people's
I've
side.
actually been here earlier with this.
Nobody.
I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order on Thursday, June 4th, 2026 at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber, which has been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91A. The prayer will be offered by Alderman Tebow, and the pledge to the flag will be led by Alderman Senate.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank Alderman Tebow for offering to clerk this evening. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Clemmons.
Unable to join us this evening.
Alderman Klee.
Up at the planning board.
Alderman Ravan.
Here.
Alderwoman Smith. Alderman Tebow is here. Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Gregg.
She had a conflict, won't be here this evening.
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Senate.
Here.
Alderman Johnson.
Present.
Alderwoman Kelly.
I am here. I am attending remotely due to childcare commitments. I am in this room alone and I can hear everyone.
Alderman Morgan.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
And Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
We have 11 people. We have quorum.
Thank you. Also joining us this evening is Mayor Jim Donchis and Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. Tonight we have a discussion, a presentation, the Harriman Facility Study presentation. I'm going to recognize Superintendent of Schools, Mario Andrade. Alderman Sullivan.
Madam President, I was looking at the agenda and I noticed that there was no public comment and there were some people from the public that had attended tonight. I'm wondering if we could, I'd like to make a motion to allow a period of public comment wherever you deem necessary at the meeting tonight.
Okay, I would suggest at the end of the meeting, because anything, we haven't been presented anything to discuss.
Right, I understand.
So if you want to make that motion, will the clerk call the roll?
Oh.
Oh, Alderman
discuss
Tebow.
it? Do we get-
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to discuss it. So this is a presentation on something that we're not even going to be voting for. It's going to come through the Board of Education. They're going to make a big decision before we even get the money for it. So I don't know why we would have public comment here on a presentation that's really the Board of Ed's responsibility. The public comment should be with them because they're the ones making the decision. They can come up here and say, you should do this and you should do that, or I think this and I think that, but we're not making that decision. So this is more of a presentation than it is that kind of thing. So I'm not sure why we would push public comment for this kind of meeting. It's not that kind of meeting. It's not one of the ones where we really should have public comment. I also want to recognize Alderwoman Smith is here as well. Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. If I may, I think it's a public meeting and I think the public is here, thus we should let them speak. Regardless of what happens tonight, even if we don't take a vote, at some point, there may be some comments about this study that I think that we're going to keep coming back to, and I think it's important that some of the people that are here tonight have probably sat through some of the public forums that have been held, and I'd like to hear what they have to say. And I have no problem with it.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. Then if we have it at the end, it should be about everything, not just about the Harriman study. I think everybody that's here can speak about whatever they want, and I advise everybody to come up, Board of Ed, speak on whatever you want in the city, because that's the open public comment. That's what Alderman Sullivan wants. That's what we should get.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm in favor of a period of public comment following the study presentation, and I do believe that we can, in doing so, ask that it be directed towards the material that we're hearing tonight. been party to many meetings throughout the city where it wasn't on the agenda, a motion was made to allow it, and it was asked at that time that the topic of public comment be the topic being discussed or presented that night. Thank you.
Alderman Johnson?
Thank you. I think it should be open to the public for comment. I want to hear what the public has to say. This way it keeps it transparent so we all know about it. If they'd like to speak on something else, that's fine, but I would really prefer if we could keep the comment to what the discussion is tonight, only because this way the school board and the administration can hear what the public is talking about this, because they might not have another chance, but where it's not at the beginning of the meeting, as far as another chance for us to be together at this point in time. But if they would like to speak on another topic, I don't have a problem with this. Thank you.
Alderman Morgan?
I do think that the public should be able to speak. We thank you for coming out. You may not have something in mind right now, but after the presentation, you may. And I agree that if there's something, this triggers something else that you may have, want to advocate on behalf of, please do so, should that be the motion.
Alderman Lopez?
I also want to support the concept of public comment, not just because I feel like I need to convince the public that I want to listen to them, because they can make public comment at the majority of our meetings. But I also appreciate the observation that was made by one of my colleagues, identifying the roles, because I think it's pretty easy for the public to sort of blend different roles, point fingers when it's politically convenient. So while I will support public comment, I also appreciate the fact that anybody was willing to speak up and remind people that this is the Board of Education's decision.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Madam President. So I would just ask the rest of the board if they had a shot to ask their constituents to come tonight and hope to speak. I mean, I saw Alderman Sullivan pushing it on his Facebook page that he would push for this tonight and that he told Ward 9 residents to come out. So did we all do that as well, or are we just getting people that are here for Alderman Sullivan? So I would have liked to, if I knew, because I looked at the meeting, there was no public comment on the meeting, so I didn't tell my constituents to come and speak. So, and I assume nobody else did as well, other than one. So, I mean, I think that's probably unfair. We should have everybody come and speak if they want to, not just people that are friends with Alderman Sullivan. So, I will support it, but I'll only support it if they can speak about anything, because that's the way the end of our meetings are. If they're going to speak in front, they can only speak about what we're talking about. If they speak at the end, they can speak on anything they want for 3 minutes, anything. And I think that's what we should do.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yeah, let's see. Alderman Ravan.
Yes.
Alderman Smith.
No.
Alderman Tebow votes no. Alderman O'Brien.
No.
Alderman Dowd.
No.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Johnson.
Yes.
Alderman Kelly.
No.
Alderman Morgan.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Sure.
Alderman Wiltshire.
Yes.
We have 7 yeses and 4 noes.
So that
So
motion.
yeses get it. You get public comment. Congratulations.
I'm sorry, Dr. Andrade, you have the floor.
So, good evening. I'm Dr. Mario Andrade, Superintendent of Schools, and I want to thank the Board of Aldermen for holding this special meeting this evening. I think it's really important, almost to Ms. Johnson's point around transparency. I want to take us back 18 months when there was legislation to fund the facility study. And what was the why at that time? And so we've been having conversations years over years of what's the future of our schools look like? What's the configurations of our buildings? But more importantly, what's the status of our buildings? I have the utmost respect for Director Sean Smith, Director of Plant Ops, and every year he comes in front of the CIP with a list of projects. And everyone's like, where did those projects come from? Who analyzed them? How do we know they're the top priorities? What's the true cost of them? And I really commend the Board of Aldermen for last year for taking an important step to say, let's do a comprehensive study. And so what we're hearing tonight is some of the recommendations coming out of a year's worth of work. And it is really not just a Board of Aldermen or Board of Education discussion, but it's a City of Nashua discussion. So I don't think it's just one meeting. We've had 3 community forums to date. It's a presentation tonight where we were supposed to meet with the Board of Education a couple weeks ago, but this is going to be ongoing meetings. And really tonight, it is about transparency. What is the status of our buildings? And what's our future projects coming up over not just 1 year, but for the next 40 years? No matter what the configuration's going to be, we also need to have a great conversation. And, the mayor has put out what is the city of Nashua's vision in 2040. Do the schools match that vision? There should be one conversation between the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Education and the city taxpayers on what do our schools look like in 2050? And more importantly, how do we fund it? So what do schools look like now in 2026? What do the schools look like in 2035? What do they look like in 2045? And that's a generational investment. And I think those are the conversations that we need to look like over time. Because you as the Board of Aldermen are doing a great plan on enticing people to the city. And part of enticing people to either come to the city or stay in the city is great public schools. And that's a community investment. And that's part of the study tonight is what do our schools look like? And really come into a shared vision on the quality of education with not only the brick and mortar, but what's also happening in the teaching and learning within those schools. And it's really a community investment. So this is a series of conversations. I don't think we're going to have one decision tonight, or there's no vote tonight, or the Board of Education coming forward, but we need community input. We need the Board of Aldermen to be aware of what's going on. We don't want something that happened a year ago of, why didn't we know about Stellos Field? Why didn't we know about this project or the status of that building? So we'll start coming into more and more data so that we can plan for the future moving forward in one vision of Nashua. So it's not just the Board of Ed, it's not just the Board of Aldermen, but it's really a city vision moving forward. So there'll be a lot of conversations going back and forth on what does it mean to my neighborhood school? But I think we need to look forward over time of what does high-quality public education look like in totality. We've been having conversations about we have a declining enrollment. Do we need all the schools? And if we do, that's fine, but there's a cost to it. If we're going to say we're going to keep all the schools open, let's keep all the schools open. But we'll see a facility study saying, what's the cost of repairs? Are we willing to make that investment? And that's a collective discussion. So again, these are going to be powerful conversations, as we say in our strategic plan, courageous conversations. They're bold conversations. They're not easy. They will impact either a financial decision or families and decisions. So I think, again, the more conversations that we can have around the data in support of our community, we're better as a one Nashua. So I'm really happy to welcome Lisa and Jamie to the podium tonight to go over where they are in the study, present some of the data, and engage in a conversation with you on what is our conditions, how do they come up with those numbers, and then start making recommendations as we start moving forward. Again, there's no decisions being made tonight, but this is really about transparency. This is the status of our schools, and really what we need to get into is what's our long-term planning? What do we want our schools to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now, and then how do we start investing in them? So I thank you for, again, having us tonight. And I'm going to invite Lisa and Jamie from Harriman to go over the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Dr. Andrade.
Well, good evening. My name is Lisa, and this is
Jamie Willett.
We're both from Harriman. We're here to give you an update on where we're at in the facility master plan. I believe you have our presentation. And if not, I have it on a thumb drive if necessary.
You might need a thumb drive.
Do you need the thumb drive?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it. I don't know if she put it on here or not. I
Here you
mean,
go.
thanks.
All right, well, waiting for that, I'll set the table a little bit. We're going to talk about the intent of the master plan, but I think Mario did a fantastic job of kind of setting the table for why this was initially started. We're going to go over the data that has been collected to date, and then we're going to talk about long-term options for consideration. And I say for consideration, we have looked at a wide spectrum of options and identified those for consideration. So this is really where the conversations that Mario was talking about will come into play as to what might be the best solution, or maybe there's some hybrid of those options to move forward with. So if we can advance the next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about the why, how, and what. So the project intent, our approach to the master plan, data collection to inform the long-term options. We'll talk about what goes into forming those options, the review of the options, what is it approximately going to cost, different considerations for cost savings, next steps in the process. And then there is a ton of data behind all of this. Some of it is included in the appendix tonight. You can see some of the decision-making matrices as to weighting some of these options is included in the appendix. But there is also in draft form right now, I think it's over 1,000 pages. Couple thousand pages of data that goes into the facilities assessment because we studied all of the schools in the district. With that, we'll go to the next slide. And you can advance from there. All right, the why. So as mentioned before, you have decreasing enrollment. We're going to highlight what the study shows for the enrollment. Your facilities are increasing in age as well. And not all the infrastructure supports the students' basic educational needs for future-ready teaching and learning. So what is needed? A proactive, sustainable, and cost-effective solution that creates warm, safe, and welcoming buildings to support our current and future population. And when we talk about proactive, it's, not just saying, oh, the boiler has failed, we need to come up with money to replace it. This study looks at, here are all the things that we're seeing in the next several years that could come up. So this puts together a plan as how to approach those, how to set money aside to approach those in the short term, the near term, and the long term. We can go to the next slide. All right, we established goals at the beginning of the project. So these are the project goals for the overall facility study. It's to address the building needs, address items beyond the critical needs of the CIP, which we just talked about for funding and planning, include how the school's investments impact student educational needs. So we'll talk about some of the programmatic elements. Always considering state aid as an option, addressing safety and security needs, addressing parking and traffic issues, and intertwining with the 5-year strategic plan that is happening simultaneously to this. So our approach, we have done communication and community engagement throughout this process. There's been several community forums where we've solicited community feedback. But where we started was the kickoff meeting to establish those goals and expectations. Then our team of architects and engineers, if you're not familiar with Harriman, we have architects and engineers in-house. So our whole team went to each of the sites. We toured the physical site itself as well as the building exterior and interior, and identified key building systems and what repairs were recommended for them and or what was the expected remaining life cycle. So to put it in context of your home, your roof only has so many years until you have to replace it. So same thing, a boiler in a school only has so many years before it has to be replaced. So we identified if it's beyond its life cycle or if it's coming up in a certain number of years for that. We also looked at capacity and utilization. So capacity is looking at the classrooms within the building and how many students, based on the size and the loading of either the DOE or the district, can be educated within that space to meet within the program that they're providing. And then the utilization looks at how many students are being educated in that building, so we can see what the utilization is. Enrollment projections, we had a third party do the enrollment projections, NESDEC. They do a lot of projections throughout New England. They are looking at live births. They're looking at historic enrollment. They are also talking to the town about any potential housing development and the number of bedrooms that may have in those different units, and they have a certain ratio of kids that usually equates to that will be in the schools. And so you'll see the data on that. And then we take that data and we start defining options, and we'll talk a little bit about our approach to defining a wide spectrum of options for everybody to consider. The next steps will be arriving at a long-term option, and then we put together the master plans. Once we know what that long-term option is, then we can start the plan of the near-term, mid-term, and overall. And that equates to the capital projects plans as well. So next slide. So what informs the options? So looking at everything that went into some options you're going to see later in the slide deck, everything from location within the district. So we look at geographic location, maybe its proximity to other schools as well. Original and average age of the facility, the condition assessment, the repair costs based on that condition assessment, the capacity of the school, the overall enrollment projections, program and educational visioning, and program cost. Those are all factors that go into the creating of the options. We'll go to the next slide. And so what goes into making a recommendation? So we aren't making the recommendation, we're giving options for the district to make a recommendation to the school board, and the school board will then make a decision as to whether that is an accepted recommendation. But these are all the things that go into making a recommendation. It's not just one thing. So there's what's called a matrices. So we created a matrices based on all the different criteria we heard throughout this process and ran each of the options through that matrices, and that's what a lot of the appendix is made up of. Cost, community input, student impact and educational impact, and operational efficiency. So that's everything that will go into an ultimate recommended option. Next slide. All right, so this is all the data that we collected. Age of facilities and renovation or addition, assessment and conditions, energy usage, demographic enrollment, capacity study, programming, and community input. We'll go to the next slide. So this is a chart we put together, and what this illustrates is the age of the original building is in that green box. And so then each dot represents when it had a major renovation and or addition. And what this does is it just illustrates maybe when the last time that school had a major renovation addition, or how many times it's been repaired or renovated and or expanded. And there's the original building, that infrastructure is still that original age, but parts of it have been replaced over time. So we'll take Amherst because it's at the top here. The original building is over 130 years old. However, it has had some major renovations and or additions that have occurred, and one of those is 60 years old, one of them is 45 years old, and one is 25 years old. And so that's ultimately what this is just trying to show in comparison. And in the yellow box, and it's kind of hard to read, but the U.S. Department of Education, National Center for Education Statistics, had a report, and they referred to Ornstein, who did a study in '94, and this data has been applicable since then, but it's a national average, 20 to 30 years old, frequent replacement of equipment is needed in schools. Same thing that we would see in our house. Between 20 and 40 years old, the original equipment should have been replaced, including the roof and the electrical equipment. And then after 40 years, a school building begins rapid deterioration. This is when you start to see some of those major renovations happening in schools. Now this next one, it is the national average, but we know it's not a end-all be-all. But what it says is after 60 years, most schools are abandoned. But we know that many schools are renovated and added on to and have lasted beyond that. And many of your schools are an example of that. So just a good data point on the age of the facilities and components in the facilities. Next. All right, so what this looks at is the square footage of all of the facilities, the number of students. And so it's just trying to compare and contrast if we divide the square footage by the number of students, what is the square foot per student? And the reason that we illustrate this is if we were to, as a benchmark, design a new school, an elementary school would typically be designed for 140 to 160 square feet per elementary student. A middle school would be designed between 160 and 180 square feet per student. And a high school, depending on if it has CTE or not, 180 to 240. And so we bolded the ones that are above, significantly above that square footage. But I will put a caveat on this, that some of these schools have more special education programs than others, so we can't just take this as black and white. It's just another data point that we have to look at as we start to consider these options. We'll go to the next slide. All right, facilities condition. So this is the heat map that we created for the facilities condition assessment. There a report and a recommendation line by line for all of the different things we see in the building. But what this does is generally look at the condition of different systems in each building. And we'll just pause here for a minute to look at the key, and then the next slide's going to blow this up so it's more legible. But excellent means it's new or in like new condition. Good condition, continue to maintain. The yellow is fair, so average for the building age, continue to maintain. Poor, worn for use, end of, I think it says expected life expectancy or life expectancy met. And then critical is extremely worn or damaged and needs to be replaced. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is where it's a little easier to read. On the left-hand side is each of the categories that were assessed. So everything from site civil, ADA compliance, envelope, and so on and so forth. Across the top is every building. And so we had each of our engineers and architects look at all of the repairs that were recommended and say, okay, if you were to give it a general rating overall, what color would it be? Now remember, there's detail behind each one of these, so there may be some things that are in new condition and others that are in critical, but maybe overall that got an average score of poor. So this allows us to quickly see, okay, where are those schools maybe that are in more of the reds, the oranges, and the yellows, the ones that need more work. And so quickly, a couple of them came forward as having more of that. The two that kind of jumped out the most were Amherst and Mount Pleasant. Those are the ones that are in the red box. The others in the orange box, Bicentennial, Charlotte, Fairgrounds Elementary School, Ledge Street, and New Cereals. So those are the ones that jumped out color-wise. And we'll go to the next slide. So this is the cost for each of those repair items. So again, we have a very detailed spreadsheet that goes line by line for all these costs. What the graph shows is those immediate repairs, those critical repair costs in the first graph, and then the near term, so beyond critical. And then what's jumping out here is a couple of the schools. So Mount Pleasant has some of the more critical repairs. And then in yellow and blue, I'm trying to find the key here. Help me out, Jamie. Which ones are those?
High schools.
Which one? Look at the over to the right.
Over to the right.
Looks like it's probably National South and National North with the 22 millions, and that's probably related to the roof.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see them combined. It'll be easier. There we go. You're spot on. All right, so those are your high schools. Not surprising, they're over 25 years old now. We're at the 25-year mark. That's when you start to see a lot of these things aging out. The other schools, so we're not seeing as much at the middle schools. There was a lot of work just done on the middle schools. The others are the elementary schools. So we're looking at Mount Pleasant probably has the highest, or does have the highest combined total. And then Amherst, New Cereals, and which one?
Ledge.
What's the one next to Mount Pleasant?
Bicentennial. Oh, next to, which one? Mount Pleasant? New Cereals.
New Cereals.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go to the next slide. This is a little easier. So this is where we put the critical, so the schools are down the left, and we have critical, which is 0 to 2, 3 to 10 year repairs, and then the total for those. And so we started to identify those that have the largest dollar amount of repairs. And Amherst and Mount Pleasant were the two that jumped out to have the highest totals. And we also look at cost per square foot, because you think about it, we have to think that these schools are different sizes, so that cost per square foot helps to kind of compare and contrast them against each other. Then we look at the ones that are in the orange, and you have Bicentennial, Charlotte, Fairgrounds, Ledge Street, and New Cereals that have a higher dollar value than some of the others, as well as a higher cost per square foot. So if we go to the next slide. We took this information and we worked with Sean to create a draft CIP, so capital improvement plan. We started with a 10 to 12 year, and we started to say, okay, what are the different priorities? There was a pretty long list of priorities, but the top ones were life safety, safety and security, HVAC and plumbing, and ADA. That's as far as we were able to get in the priority list for the 10 to 12 years. We assigned $2 million in repairs per year in this 10 to 12 years. It equates to about $20.1 million in 10 to 12 years. The total repair value of all of these schools is $144 million. So you can see that taking this approach takes a very small bite out of the overall need. And so that's why we start to look at, are there other big picture options that we can potentially do to address the needs overall?
Lisa, I just want to note that that 20.1 million is again in today's dollars. So we, in our CIP plan, we have planned out with the escalation of 3 to 4% each year to fit that $2 million.
But yeah, so the 20 million is in today's dollars, as well as the overall 144 million. And then depending on how we do the plan, we'll escalate accordingly. Yeah, next slide. All right, we also look at energy usage. One of the things we look at is EUI, that's energy use intensity. To put that in terms everyone understands, you think about miles per gallon for your car, it's the same idea for EUI is the same thing for a building. Here though, the lower the number, the better. And so we gave a benchmark at the bottom when we picked an elementary school for reference. When we design a new elementary school, we are targeting an EUI of 25 to 30, just so you can see in comparison. And lots, I think almost all are above that, and some are significantly above that. So Charlotte, New Cereals, and the administration building have the highest EUI. We also look at total energy costs per square foot. Again, that allows us to compare and contrast based on the size of the building. And you start to see some of those values climbing up there. What we're doing right now is digging into some of these numbers to see, are there any anomalies that might be causing that? Is there something to do with the HVAC system or things like that? Something to keep in mind, because some of these you may be surprised, they might be lower than one might think. Older buildings that maybe haven't had renovations to mechanical systems, just for example, the code has changed to where we need to meet certain ventilation rates, which causes more draw on power. And so if it's an older building, it may not have that draw on the power, which may mean that it's a lower cost per square foot.
And you may have said this, but the higher the EUI, the less efficient the building is.
Yeah. All right, next slide. All right, we're going to get into demographics and enrollment data real quick. So the trends, in the demographic trends, population 2013 to 2030, or 2023, there's 5.3 increase. However, the median age has increased as well. So in 2000, it was 35.8. Now in 2023, it was 39.7. Percent of population 0 to 18-year-olds has decreased by 3.5%, as well as the birth rate has decreased 14.59%. For enrollment data, again, we started this study several months back, so you can see we'll give the years to when we're pulling some of this data. In 2025, 9,526 students in the district. Projected K-12 student decrease in the next 3 years, and they typically say the next 3 years are the most accurate data, is a drop of 680 students. And so the percent change is 10.6 decrease. And then we also look at the highest projected year out in the enrollment study because we want to make sure that we're planning for that largest number. In 26-27, which is right around now, you're projected to have 8,876 students. So your highest year is very soon, and then you'll continue to see decline from there. All right, next slide. So essentially what I just said, but in another slide with key takeaways. We'll go to the next one. All right, capacity data. Elementary schools, 4,224 students. We calculated the capacity. They're under capacity. They're about 78% utilized. Projected high enrollment for elementary students is 4,185. And then the projected enrollment as far out as the study is projecting in 2034-35 is 3,978. So you're seeing the decline, underutilization. Same with the middle school, 2,006 students. It's 80% utilized, 2,011 students projected at the high number, so not actually a small increase. And then the furthest out year, there is 1,869. Again, that going out that far, data is harder to predict because you're basing it on different statistics, but 3 years out, it's real data, it's live births. High school, 3,268 students. It's at capacity, about 99% utilized. 2,730 students at the highest projected year, and then 2,564 at the 34-35. So even though it's at capacity, you're seeing that decline in enrollment, so it should work itself out. Next slide. And again, just the key takeaways I walked everybody through. All right, we talked about facilities, and that is incredibly important to understand what the repairs are for the buildings themselves. But we also have to remember that these buildings have to support the education that's happening within these buildings. And do they have the right programmatic spaces? Are they meeting the district's vision for education long-term? So we did a series of workshops to identify the educational vision. And that equated to an educational specification that really outlines what the schools and spaces should be designed for to be future ready. And we did these virtual interactive workshops. About 40 district and school leadership, teachers, students, parents, and community members were part of each one of these. And it was really great to see. It was really great to see some of the students on there. But we'll kind of walk you through some of the key takeaways here. Next slide. So the visioning led to educational priorities, architectural priorities, and community priorities. And you can see them listed in each of the columns up here. I won't read through all of them. But that gave us an idea of what those overall priorities are. Next slide. The top educational focus areas, there was 9 of them that came out. So hands-on, project-based learning, student-centered learning, growth mindset, social emotional learning, mastery of core academics, STEM and STEAM. If you don't know what that is, that's science, technology, engineering, and art and math if it has the A. Enrichment programming, anywhere, anytime learning, and professional learning communities. The priority learning goals, you can see them up here on the screen. So these came out of that visioning session as to what are those learning goals for the district. Next slide. And then speaking with school leadership, so we met with principals at each school to identify the key programmatic elements that needed to be addressed in each of the schools. These are the themes that came out of those. And then from the educational specification, these are the key recommendations for design. And so safety and security and welcoming, integrated universal design and accessibility, create agile, flexible learning neighborhoods, incorporate sustainable and healthy building practices, enhance technology integration across all learning spaces. Next slide. Provide hands-on makerspace and allied learning labs, develop indoor-outdoor movement and wellness spaces, support collaboration and professional learning, and design cafeteria and multi-purpose gathering areas, and enable after-hours and community use. And then the building design requirements, this kind of breaks down the key design areas and how to go about designing them based on that ed spec that came out of that visioning session. So from learning commons collaboration to classroom neighborhoods and flexible clusters. I can see we have a spelling error on there, we'll fix. Next slide. Support spaces, so that's your administration, your counseling, your health, your custodial. One of the big differences in schools today from when some of the schools are built that haven't received some of the recent renovations is special education has grown so much, and the schools weren't designed for those programs. And there is a need for a lot more smaller pull-out spaces to work with students that these buildings weren't designed for. Dining, kitchen, and multi-purpose, design criteria around that. Next slide. Technology infrastructure requirements, and then acoustical lighting and indoor air quality standards. So the district now has this, so any project that they go forward with, they can provide this document to any of the design teams so they can understand what their expectation is. All right, so special education, we're gonna highlight elementary school here. A lot of the options are focused on elementary due to the needs identified. But working with the district, identifying an approach to what needs to be designed for in the master plan. And so in the yellow column are those intensive needs programs and the number that are needed at the different schools. ELL, quantity of classrooms, flexible special ed spaces, also used for resource spaces, flexible education classrooms. So one of the hardest things to predict is special education. We don't know which students are coming in when with which needs, and so having it as flex space that could be utilized as an additional intensive needs space if necessary, and then one occupational and physical therapy space per school. And we just kind of gave a little description as to when we say that space, what does it mean from a, or when we say that program, what does it mean from a space standpoint? All right, next slide. So the design language, this is one of the forums we did with the public. We went through from the visioning, guiding principles, so those are big picture, architectural, educational, and community priorities you heard, school design patterns. They helped us craft a design statement for the overall master plan and any work that comes out of that. And so they defined the future schools of Nashua through words and phrases they used were student-focused, vocational and technical training focused, world-ready, innovative, inclusive, diverse. The common design patterns that came forward were agile classrooms, universal design and access, welcoming arrival, and secure entry. And the statement that came out of that activity was an inclusive, forward-looking learning environment that sparks innovation and prepares students for the world. Go to the next slide. And so if we pulled all that language we just talked about together, this is kind of this is the design language that ultimately whatever option is selected needs to address. And so as we go through the options, we had to identify, okay, how do we start thinking about integrating these different programmatic elements into each of these buildings? And so this is just a chart showing what we were able to incorporate in the different buildings when we say we're renovating and or expanding the school and the options that are forthcoming in the slide deck. So looking at wayfinding, collaboration space in grade level neighborhoods, major renovation. Some of these schools don't have walls between the classrooms, so some of these options look at providing walls between the classrooms, so that would really trigger a major renovation in some areas. 21st century learning commons, a STEM and STEAM space, satellite dining, and I'll describe that a little bit because it's a little bit of a foreign concept sometimes. This is really important for those students with higher needs sometimes, and just some of us that might be overwhelmed with a lot of noise or people in a space. Cafeterias can be very overwhelming for different students. And what this does is it provides a space adjacent to the cafeteria. They have visibility of their peers, but it's a smaller space, lower volume. The acoustics are easier, but it allows them to be with their peers, but in a space that addresses some of those needs. Administration renovations, and adding or modifying a stage. So those are the things that were considered. All right. I'm going to go over what informs the options, and when we get to the options, I'm going to have Jamie take us through the options. So we talked about this diagram on the right already, what is informing the options. Some of the key takeaways from the data that we just walked you through that inform the options. You're operating 12 elementary schools right now. Elementary schools are generally underutilized. Ages of schools vary. Recent renovations for schools vary. The schools are spread around the city. In some cases, some buildings are in close proximity and others aren't. Building repair costs only are estimated, repair costs only are estimated at 144.8 plus or minus $1 million. This does not consider programmatic needs. And including both repairs and elementary school program needs, the estimated total cost range is between $218.2 million and $269.2 million. Note that this does not include any programmatic needs that may be at the high school. That is still being reviewed. And so with that, I'll let Jamie go through the options.
And again, I'd like to remind folks that the cost presented there is today's dollar. So obviously we also know what escalation is and we're seeing it. So we usually would carry a 3 to 4% for each year as you start to get into planning out those repairs. All right, so the options here are kind of highlighted across. We have the existing is across the top, and then we have options A through E right now. These are not all the possible options, but this is looking at a wide range of options, and based on that criteria that Lisa just presented, is how we kind of start to explore these options. So each color there, the blue represents like an existing building, the white represents more of like just general maintenance items that'll be ongoing sort of items. Yellow starts to get into repairs and program updates being needed. A gray bubble will represent closing a school, and a green will be constructing a new school to accommodate closed schools where it's needed. So option A looks to provide renovations and the baseline renovations and repairs or maintenance items to all the schools. So you're maintaining all the schools that you already have for elementary and continuing to use them, but continuing to make those repairs as needed. Option B starts to explore potentially closing some schools. So Mount Pleasant and New Cyrils, again, using that criteria that was talked about previously, would be closed in this option, and those students would be redistributed within the existing school district, utilizing extra space that's already in the school district based on the utilization slides we talked about a little bit ago. Option C also looks to is a different avenue of saying, what if you closed Amherst and Mount Pleasant, and then building a new central school, a new northern school to accommodate those students as what, and the size of that school would also account for taking some of those students and distribute them through the schools as needed, and whatever's left over, you could build a school that size or size it appropriately so that the schools are pretty even within each other. Option D closes down 4 of your older schools that need the more, not older schools, but more of the schools that need more repairs and fall across that criteria we just talked about. But then in that case, you'd have to kind of build 2 schools potentially, maybe a northern school and a southern school, because you're closing northern schools and southern schools and redistributing some of the students. But again, the size of that school will be dependent upon how many students can be distributed and then how many would need to be accommodated for in those new schools. And so those schools, just to recap those, that would be Amherst, Bicentennial, Mount Pleasant, and New Cyrils. And option E starts to get, again, closing more schools, and I think the additional school there, additional schools, I'll just read them out. Amherst, thank you, Charlotte, I'm going to wear my glasses tonight, Fairgrounds, Ledge Street, Mount Pleasant. And then you'd build a new northern school and a new central school because that's the proximity of the schools that are closing. So, next slide. Oh, God, I can't read that.
All right, I'll talk to it. So, a lot of data on one side, but what we wanted to illustrate is We are trying to provide a wide variety of options. What led to looking at how we arrived at these different options and maybe which schools may be considered for closure in some of these options? This kind of puts it all into perspective. On that map, which is kind of hard to see, but what we did is we drew circles around different geographic regions of where schools are close together. So we kind of put a circle around the northern ones that were close together. We put a circle around the southern ones that were close together. We put a circle around, I'm calling it the west central and the east central that are close together. And so that's how they're grouped in this table down below. So we're looking at when we start talking about some of these options that may close Amherst or Charlotte or Mount Pleasant, or in one option it closes all three and builds a new school. We're looking at that high repair cost. We are also looking at the utilization as well in some cases. And so when we get to the Central West, same thing. We're looking at the one that has the high repair cost. Also in this case has a low utilization. When we get to the Southern, it's the ones with the high repair cost as well as the low utilization. And then in the Central East, it really is driven by cost of repair. So in the description of each of those options, it will kind of walk you through, we look to close X number in the northern area, or one in the north and one in the south, because when we look at some of these areas, a lot of these schools start to get somewhat close together. And so that's the criteria that we use just to identify ones that you may consider for closure. Through this process, we may hear, hey, why don't we consider X for these different reasons? This is just a snapshot in time as to where these options are, but we wanted to clarify how that came to be.
Okay, so this is again a recap of each of the options. Option A, all 12 existing schools remain open, and you'd end up providing repairs and program updates to all those schools. Across the top, you'll see the estimated rough order of magnitude cost, again in today's dollars, to accomplish the elementary school work is $114,195. The middle school, high school, which is redundant in all these options, is about $62 million plus or minus in today's dollars. So all in for option A for repairs and program updates for all of your schools, you're in the range of, again, in today's dollars, $176 million to $257 million.
With the caveat that your high school programmatic needs have not been fully identified yet.
Right, thank you. So then option B, again, that is closing Mount Pleasant and New Searles. You're down to 10 schools in that option, and you're redistributing the students from those schools to other schools, but making repair updates and upgrades and programmatic updates to your other schools. All in today's dollars, you're around, for this option, $175 to $218 million. Option C, this one closes Amherst and Mount Pleasant and builds a new school. And so the cost to have those 10 schools in operation is approximately $211 to $284 million. Option D, closing Amherst and Mount Pleasant, building a new school for that area, and then closing Bicentennial and New Searles and building a school for that area. That brings you down to 8 schools. So long term, you're starting to reduce your repairs and maintenance on the amount of schools you have and operating costs. But for the total cost for that option in today's dollars is $297 million to $324 million. And then finally, option E brings you down to 7 elementary schools. You're closing Amherst, Charlotte, Fairgrounds Elementary, Ledge, Mount Pleasant, building 2 new schools. And that option equates to approximately $276 million to $313 million. The middle school, so in all those options included work to the middle school. Again, the programmatic cost for the high school hasn't been fully identified as of yet. We're still having those discussions. But currently with the repairs and some of the programmatic needs that have been identified, you're at $62 million for those options.
All right, so what we created was an evaluation matrix to be able to evaluate the different options. What went into that evaluation matrix were the district master plan goals, the educational visioning outcomes and educational specifications, programming priorities, and facility assessments and data. And so these are the results of running it through that matrices. The appendix has all of the backup data on that if people want to dig into that. But ultimately, it's looking at, of all that criteria, you can see the percentage that each of the options meets of that criteria. Remember, this is one piece of that flow chart we talked about for making a recommendation. The matrices is one piece, but just to see how these measure up against those overall elements. So what is this approximately going to cost? We just went through that and all the options. I like to be able to see things side by side, so this is just a side-by-side comparison of what each of the options cost. Under each of the options, you'll see the total number of remaining schools, the number of schools closed in that option, and/or the number of new schools built. And then just some cost savings examples, and I will caveat this with, it does not include the cost that would be incurred to build a new school, but just using a data point provided to us by the district on what cost savings would be generally for closing a school, it's roughly a savings of 1.6 to 1 million per year. So if you think about that over, let's say if you were to bond a project and you want to compare that savings versus what you would spend on a project, you would see a savings of about 32 to 36 million per year for every school that you close. Now, once you start building new schools, you're going to negate some of that savings, but again, just a reference point so that we kind of have that data as we're going through this exercise.
Just a little intermission music, sorry.
I thought that was my phone.
There'll no cell phones in this chamber.
All right, next steps. So we're at the end, last slide here. So the next steps are to narrow down the options and then identify the final long-term option for One Nashua, and then put together a phase plan to get there. And then this is all just the appendices. We don't have to go through this. This is just for reference.
Okay, are you willing to take some questions?
Absolutely.
Sure, we'll have many. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple of things I didn't see in this, and thank you, it was a good report. And may I ask, sort of the President, I've seen a couple of us aldermen who are wearing glasses kind of straining through the lens. Can we have a copy of this so we can digest it? Okay. But to get into my questions, I'll give it to you and then you can divide it. Our schools are beacons of a neighborhood. Nashua is a very neighborhood. There's social pride with this. So closing some schools, you lose a community identity. There's music programs, they have their little, presentations and everything. I've been to a couple with my grandchildren, quite nice, they're cute, The music stinks, but it's good.
That's part of the experience.
You didn't say that.
I'm not talking about my grandkids. But anyways, you got that loss. And then also, too, I asked the question, closing any schools, what does the state recommend? How long can a child stay on a school bus? And I didn't see that. And to me, that is very critical, because, and that's also, too, a loss. What money we are saving, perhaps in closing a school, we're going to have an increased cost in transportation. So it cuts down any real benefit, And so do you have anything with that? And you can eliminate the music program, you know.
I'm not going to eliminate the music program, that's important. But no, all joking aside, to your point, we are providing the options for consideration. Absolutely, we understand your sentiments about the schools. Again, we're providing the data, considerations, and that ultimately is going to have to come down to what does Nashville want to support, right? So that's why we provided an option where they all stay open. So we have everything from that to reducing the numbers drastically and stuff in between. Your other question was about transportation. So one of the things, as we narrow the options down, we're going to have to work with transportation to figure out what is the impact and how do we articulate that. So we're just not there yet.
Quick follow-up, if I may?
Yes.
Would you look at that in dollars and cents of things? Because it probably would be an increase in the transportation need.
We would have to look at what the impact is. So I would have to
Right.
talk with transportation to see if they have the means to
Yeah.
calculate that.
Okay, and then my question is, I think there is a state law, how long, and I'll let somebody else, you know. I wouldn't want a kid on a bus for an hour on a February morning, you know.
We'll look into that for sure.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Good questions. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I'd also note that, it's likely that depending on which option you choose, there's probably some level of redistricting that needs to happen within the city to help limit how much travel time you get, so.
And I agree, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you so much. I did come to your last time you presented this, well, maybe not your last time, but I was encouraged to see some new data. I do have some questions around data, if I can get geeky for a moment. The slide where you were talking about the rough order of magnitude for costs. So in the one where we keep the schools, is that predicated over the life of those buildings or just like what it's going to cost us today?
So the cost that was provided for that, I think it's 144 million in repair cost, that is a 10-year, that is an assessment of 10 years of project. So after another 10 years, there's going to be another set of boilers that need to be replaced or another roof that's going to have to be replaced. We did a 10-year assessment of the buildings.
Okay, thank you. And then if I could follow up?
Yes.
My second question was around, in the ones where you predicated closing schools, does that number assume that we're taking those schools off of the district's, maintenance, all of that? Like they're sold, they're gone? Or is it accounting for them still being there?
Yeah, so the cost provided within an option reduces the amount, takes the schools that are being closed, their repair costs out of the equation.
Just repair costs, not necessarily maintenance or mothballing, anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So I think you're referring to the savings for closing a school. That came from the district, and I believe that includes both the repair, the maintenance, the operation of the building. So it's essentially assuming it's taken out of the portfolio.
So you're assuming that, okay. The reason I ask is because once they're no longer schools, then this board can decide what happens with them. So I just don't know how long, if that was a case to go, how long would we be sitting with these buildings before they're sold or changed or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's a future question for all of you to entertain what happens with those schools.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and I will echo that it was very hard to read. So I look forward to being able to see that and actually zoom in and see some of those. A couple of things that I did not see, and I'm curious if this was just outside your purview, or if you could speak to your experience. I didn't see any outside influences that may be directing some of these numbers. The only one I saw was live birth rate. Right? We can't control that. That's an outside influence. What I didn't see is any information around like charter schools or private schools. What is the comparison to their enrollment and their numbers, their usage, the rate at which they're opening or closing? Is that anything you can speak to?
Yeah, that's outside our purview. So essentially, we're looking at the enrollment and how it impacts your schools. They are in that enrollment study looking at the construction projects in town and how that may be an outside influence on that as well, but we are not specifically looking at that.
Thank you.
Alderman Johnson.
Thank you very much. What was your enrollment shrinking to by, what was it, 2030? 2035?
Off the top of my head, I want to say 8,165, but I could have that off.
8,165. Okay, because I'm looking at the study, the redistricting study I have in front of me. I guess I'm cheating a little bit because I was on the board when they did that for the middle school. And we were also going to redistrict, we were talking about redistricting, hey Jen, the elementary school, but a lot of us felt at that point in time, because of COVID, it was not going to be conducive because the students. So I guess I got to refresh myself. I'm going to ask these questions because these are kind of fresh in my brain here. I know that when Mr. Preston was talking to us, he factored in that we're building a lot of apartments, and with the apartments, most likely we're not going to have an influx of children because the studio 1 and 2-bedroom apartment, maybe some 3-bedroom apartments. So how are you adjusting for all that in this whole study on what you did?
So the NESDEC, who runs the enrollment projections, they look specifically at those projects that are coming online, and a 1-bedroom equates to a certain percentage of students, a 2-bedroom a certain percentage. It's really when you get to that 3-bedroom where you see in percentage-wise a whole student or multiple students coming into the district. So there's in their full report, I just don't remember the data specifically off the top of my head, but they're using data to equate to that.
May I continue?
Yes.
Could you send us some of that data for the board?
Yeah, the report, I don't know if the enrollment report's on the website yet, but if it isn't, we'll make sure that we get it posted.
Yeah, because I think that's very important when you're considering this, because Mr. Preston talked about, I think we could close up to about 6 schools, which I was not in favor of that at that point in time. I'm still not in favor of it at this point in time, because I think if you're going to start closing, you need to close 1 or 2 at a time and see how you're going to redistrict any of your students, and see how that's going to work out. I mean, and I've said all along, I think Mount Pleasant has to be the first one that needs to be closed because of the magnitude of work that has to be done in there, because we've let that building go down so far. But I'm also kind of concerned with, we take out 1 or 2 elementary schools and then we're going to build one. And I have to agree with my colleague, Alderman O'Brien, because in this community, everything is more or less community-centered, neighborhood-centered. So, but I believe that we're going to have to close some schools down because of the way the student population is declining so fast. With this year, 9,500 students, you can't justify this anymore. And I mean, I'm glad I don't have to make this decision this time. My former colleagues, and I have the utmost respect for them. But you just can't keep something open if you can't supply with the students in there, because it's failing, because I don't believe you're going to meet the needs of all the students because you're spreading yourself out too thin at this point in time. So, I mean, that's a hard decision. And may I continue?
Yes.
And which elementary school still has an open concept? There shouldn't be any, because that, is it no.
Sunset still has open.
Sunset?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know we did Birch Hill and we did Maine Dunstable.
Yeah, I think there's 2, I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but they have classroom wings, and it's not fully, the walls are not complete across all the spaces.
Okay, because it is very interesting, this report, and I'd really like to compare it with the one that I was part of, because it kind of outlined everything, I think, in the beginning, for Harriman almost to kind of follow up on, because yours is interesting, but I think when Mr. Smith did all of this, I think it laid the groundwork on what the future was going to have to be in the city with the schools. Like I said, and you're telling us our enrollment is going to decrease, you have 8165, he has 8252, so it's pretty close, We've got to be able to maintain the schools and not spread ourselves, because we have to have good quality, not that we don't have it, but for the future, we need to be able to to provide good quality education in the district and not have to worry about that we can't get teachers or nurses, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I have Alderman Lopez next.
So what's the further scope, the ongoing scope of your contract and your services from this point?
So from this point, we will evaluate the remaining options based on different things that we're hearing from the different groups. We'll work with the school department to make a narrowed down list and ultimately come forward with a recommendation to the school board. Once a recommendation for a long-term option is determined, then that helps to set up the plan for, okay, here's the long-range plan of what we're trying to achieve. How do we do this in an approach to be able to continue to maintain whatever schools long-term, and then a near-term, and then ultimately get to the end. So it's really master planning out to that option that is selected.
Paul?
Yes.
I would hope that over the remaining part of narrowing down these plans, you are open to input. I'm pretty concerned about, some of what my colleagues have pointed out, that there is this cost-benefit assessment of how much it saves the school district to do things, but not that much consideration as to how much it costs the city. What the overall impact might be, even in terms of transportation, is one of the biggest budget items that we'd be looking at. So those are a lot of questions, and then having it presented in a format that was extremely content-rich visuals that we don't have a copy of,
Yeah.
I mean, none of us would be anywhere near being able to make a decision, which is, I know you're not necessarily presenting to us, but if this is the point where we start narrowing down options based on assumptions that are being made, we might need to see all of that data that you're talking about to understand the foundation of those assumptions in order to have any kind of confidence in them. And I imagine the school district, or at least the Board of Education, is in just as difficult a position, because they're not going to want to go through all this work only to have us start asking questions that undermines it. They need to be able to look at this information too and digest it. And I think the public, as much as we always try, there's always people who come out and say, wait a minute, I didn't hear about this, I have input. There's a lot of information out in the public, and there's a lot of professionals that have insight that we do need to make sure we're capturing. So, like I said, as you start to narrow down or start to evaluate options, I hope these aren't all of them.
Okay, you're all set, Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I wanted to thank you both for coming out tonight and putting this together. I think that when we talk about something like this, it's very emotional, and I think what you tried to do is present an objective report based on data. And I think that the story you're trying to tell is that should or when the decision has to be made to close some schools, build other schools, whatever happens, this is a recommendation on what you should do. So I applaud you for that, because I think it, as best you can, which is really impossible, but you tried to take emotion out of it. Because you all, I don't think, are from here, and you're looking at it from outside of the bottle. So I appreciate that, and I can understand it. But when I look at, I wanted to talk specifically about a couple of the slides that you had, ages of existing facilities, and I'm going to pick on Birch Hill for an example. Now, maybe I'm not reading the slide correctly, but the way that I see it is you have the total age of the school, and then you have a black dot and that represents a renovation. So being on the Joint Special School Building Committee, I know that Birch Hill was recently renovated. So why wouldn't it have a black dot close to the green square?
Oh, it wouldn't be close to the green square, it would be back at 0, because essentially that renovation is 0, pretty much 0 years old.
The green squares was, the building was originally built, and then each dot going left is a newer renovation.
Correct.
Okay, so that's how I should.
So it's trying to show that some elements of that building are relatively new, yet some of them are at that green square. So there's a range of,
On top, you can
age.
see the 0 years all the way up to 130 years ago.
Okay. Could I have a follow-up, please?
Yes.
Thank you for explaining that, because I was reading it wrong. And then on the other one, there was an energy use comparison, and now I'm going to pick on Maine Dunstable because that seemed to be a little bit high, and I think that we just renovated a lot of that, including, I looked at that boiler with Mr. Smith back a few years ago, and I was happy to see that we were going to replace that. So I was just surprised that that energy cost was so high, considering the amount of renovations that we just put in
Yeah,
there.
and what that might be is typically we'll want 3 years of data after it's been renovated to understand how it's fully operating.
Okay.
So when that data was provided, it could have been right after it opened, so the 3 years we had was prior to that renovation.
Okay.
So that's something, that's why we say we have to dig into those numbers, because sometimes there are things just like that.
Okay. One more.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing, so far I'm 0 for 2 on how to read slides, so I'll go for a third, in that I didn't see on any of the options, you had a cost in there, how much it would cost to close a school, build a school. I didn't see a carve out on how much it would cost. In your estimation, you are architects, so a wild guess on what it would cost to build a brand new school.
So that's in the options. So
Is
if you
it?
look at each,
Okay.
if you look at
0 for
each.
3.
It's not
So if
you,
you
it's the
look at the
presentation's
option
too
slide where we
content
break
rich.
down the cost, it will show you, if it says new school, it will show you the cost. Keep going until you get, way down there. And where we have one more, couple more, right here, these types of slides. So if there's a new
Yes.
school here,
Yeah.
it should be at the bottom as to what was assumed for a new build.
That would have been build a new one.
Okay, so that was it.
Option C.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at option C.
New North School.
Where?
Could we all look at option C?
Oh, there it is, okay. $66.6 million.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
it tells you, I think on there, it shows you our assumptions.
Yep. Okay. All right, awesome. I'm done.
Alderman Dowd.
That's cool.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to mention that I've worked for many years with Jamie and Lisa. They've been involved in our schools for quite some time. They started, I believe, with Broad Street and McCarthy School, Maine Dunstable, Birchill. So they've been involved in a lot of our school projects and are very familiar with the Nashua School District and our buildings, most of our buildings. And I also wanted to point out that they're involved in numerous other schools across New England and have designed and built schools all over New England. So they have a really good background in that. So the one couple of things, being pretty familiar with all the buildings, when you were evaluating whether a school should be closed and a new school built, did we evaluate whether the structural integrity of the building frame would survive a complete redesign instead of a new build? In other words, much like what you did to Maine Dunstable and Birch Hill, we basically replaced everything, and it would undoubtedly be a lower cost than building a new building. for many
And buying the
reasons.
property and making all those
But that's something to consider. I don't want to get too far away from my mic. The other thing is, on New Searles, we just spent several $1 million on a project at New Searles. And yes, I would say half of the school needs to have more work done. They still have chalkboards in some of the classrooms. However, we replaced some of the chalkboards because we rebuilt the front of the school, basically. We put a whole new fire alarm system in because every time we touch a school, we got to put a whole new fire alarm system in. I don't care what we do to it, we get a new fire alarm system. We did a whole new power distribution system in the school because we had to do that because of the added requirements. And so a lot of changes were made. And, you know, that should probably be taken into consideration in that particular school. Instead of closing, it should probably just have the other half of the school have the work done that needs to be done. And there are no other schools nearby. The other thing I wanted to mention is some of the maintenance projects, and I know you helped them, Sean, with the CIC. I sit on the CIC, and I know the priorities of the projects. And there are some maintenance things that need to be done sooner than others. For instance, roofs. You know, if you allow roofs to leak, you have more damage inside the school, and you have the possibility of mold, and, you know, so roofs are very important. We just went through that with the fire stations. So that's the consideration. And the other thing that has to be pointed out is when you close a school, no matter which one it is, there's also, well, if you're gonna build a new school, you're gonna have to, can't close the school till you build a new school. The other thing is when you close a school, we have to know what we're going to do with that building. Like, it's still costing us a lot of money for Elm Street that we closed because it reverts to the city. Now, in that particular project, we're gonna be tearing it down and building new houses, so that's a, but say if you close Mount Pleasant, we have to have another use. So until that use is identified and it comes to fruition, there is a cost to the city. Is that considered in your savings in closing Mount Pleasant?
I'll answer that one right now. Not at this time in that number. It was a general number. If you close a school, the impact to the school district. It did not take that into account at this time.
And the other thing I wanted to point out is on the energy numbers that we were looking at, you're right, we don't get new numbers for about 3 years, like, and we had nothing on McCarthy. McCarthy has a full solar array on the roof. There's a lot of solar arrays up there. Pennachuck has solar arrays on, and we don't have the 3 years of data on that yet. So some of the things we've done for energy efficiency, like the high schools, we had a major program to improve the lighting in the school to save money, and that hasn't been 3 years, I don't think, Sean. Close. So, as many times Sean and I have gone through the numbers, especially on electricity, and it takes time to get what the true savings are. So those numbers might be a little high.
Yep.
So just wanted, so people understand. But again, thank you for the presentation. I know you guys have done a lot of work. It's quite a feat to go through 18 schools doing anything, never mind just trying to evaluate them. Thanks.
Alderman Smith?
Yes, and just thank you. And it's adding to what my colleagues have said. So thank you for, all of your hard work. I would also love to have a copy. I thought I had a copy of the slides because I was twisting and turning. One of my questions have to do, and I didn't see it, is just based on, where we see the schools going in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and thinking about investing money in either new buildings or improving their infrastructure. How have you tied in the changing technology for this? Because it is going to be significantly different when I start. And I didn't hear anything about the cost of that, because that also will impact what the structures will look like and what they will, the technology that they will need to support.
We did have our electrical team look at the buildings for data infrastructure, things like that. And so there's some costs associated with attention to that. Not full scale, it's just kind of bringing the buildings up to today's standard. Going in the future, we may not know what that technology is. So it's hard. Technology changes so rapidly, as all of us know. We don't know what AI is going to do for technology around the world. So we've accounted for what the school's current model is for this district, for the school buildings.
Okay. And I feel like I want to have a follow-up question, because you're right, we can't predict the future, but I'm thinking whatever we put in there today, as we know, it's going to be outdated probably in 3 years, 5 years.
Right.
So my concern is the amount of, the cost for technology sometimes can be more than actual cost of the building, right. Depending on the fiber optics and things that you need to do underground, et cetera. So I'm greatly concerned regarding that, and that the schools being able to, not completely be ahead, but at least stay in step. Because I think thinking about today's technology, then it already would be behind.
So one of the things that we do when we look at adjusting a school for technology. Obviously, we talked about bringing it up to the current. We also provide additional pathways, so it's easier to rerun without disrupting all the work that had just been done on the project. So that is one way that we can plan ahead, because you're right, we may need to, in so many years, change it out to be at the next standard. But the more that we can make it flexible to be able to run all that technology easier through the building is something we look to do as well.
And also, just thinking about our programmatic visioning sessions, there was a lot about looking forward to flexible classrooms, adaptability, flexibility of classrooms in the future. So providing these spaces allows for flexibility and adaptability of future teaching, which ties directly into the technology side of things.
And then my other follow-up question, just based on, current trends in education, especially around special needs, and the increasing demand that is definitely going to be there, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. With us looking at the potential of closing some buildings, how are we looking at making sure that the remaining schools are set up or have the capacity for providing special needs services and having areas such as sensory classrooms and things of this nature?
That's a really, really good question. And one of the slides spoke to special ed because we wanted to really drill down and figure out what is needed, and then how do we provide some flex spaces so that, once it's built, oh no, all of a sudden we have an increase, what do we do? And that's where we see, the best laid plans can go awry without having some flex space to grow in. And those are the programs that we see growing exponentially. And they have different space requirements. They have different need requirements. There's different types of spaces that are needed. So in that chart, you'll see the assumptions that are not the assumptions, but the design outline as to what will be considered. If a school closes, then we need to find that same number in the remaining schools. So it's a total number that needs to be accounted for. So whatever option is to move forward, it needs to include that total number of spaces that was outlined.
Okay, so the building design, the building designers are already looking at including these additional learning spaces that will be required for either quiet testing or sensory sound, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's quite a few rooms in each building, in each school.
Alderman Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, allowing me to quickly follow up on what I had asked about earlier. As you move forward in the rest of your scope, it would be really helpful, even if it was just an appendix, to see any of those outliers and those data points that could be contributing to some of the numbers that we're seeing within our school district. The number of private or charter schools that are in the area, the number of that have opened within the past X years that you seem appropriate, the amount that may have closed, and what those projections look like moving forward in the same comparison as the timeline for this, the 10 years, and any other data points that you think would be contributory that we may not have even discussed. Thank you.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the presentation. It's a heck of a lot of information. I had a question here, and it could be contemplated. It could be thinking a little too far forward, but just with the consideration of what schools look like today, with any of these plans that contemplate a combination of closure and new builds, does this contemplate like an ideal square footage for a new facility, or would that be something that couldn't be contemplated until you determine like student distribution?
So in the new builds, we're taking into account a design number of students, and so that would be designing that space to, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the ideal, but it's kind of what we target for efficiency. So it's making sure that we have that, I'll use the elementary school, for example, that 140 to 160 is really based on a lot of schools being designed to accommodate all the different programs, whether it be, cafeteria, kitchen, gym, mechanical spaces, the educational spaces, the thickness of the wall, all of that. So that's taking that into account. So what you can do with a new build, and not advocating one way or another, but what you can do with a new build is be more efficient in the layout and therefore have less square footage for that number of students, which equates to less maintenance Because the more square footage you have, the more maintenance you have. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, sort of, yeah. I mean, I guess the real crux of my question is to ideally, like, envision what size a new build would be. We would first need to know, hey, what plan we're going with, and then which students would be pulled from which schools and sent where, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think some of that is related to what we talked about earlier with the redistribution or redistricting of the school and see where they go. So if there is an option in there where you close 2 schools and move students to the other remaining schools, which would, but if you were trying to close another set of 2 schools, you're going to have to know which ones are going where to find out what size that school gets built. So it does need some level of redistricting considerations. We've made an assumption based on our knowledge of what the potential option might be, and so that's why you see a new cost for a school in there. But we're a little bit conservative, and maybe it can come down depending on where those students end up going.
All right, thank you so much.
Alderman Mervan.
Thank you, Madam President. As a kid who went through some of this in the 60s, our high school ended up going away, and we moved into what was then the new high school as junior high school kids, and we spent all of our junior high and high school time in that one building. What strikes me about this, first of all, thank you. Oh my gosh, saying we got a lot of data is an understatement. As a data guy, I was okay with that, but yeah, I'll spend some time with every one of these sheets going over it. Thank you for all that hard work. What my question is about feasibility. Is there any way to rank the feasibility of each of these plans? That is because building one school in Nashua is a big deal. Building 2 schools in Nashua is obviously a bigger deal. And what happens to the kids that are going to transition and the kids who are moving away and all of the movement of students that affects the feasibility of doing it? And did you factor any of that into the cost when you said, well, we're going to build one high school and it's going to cost this much? Did you factor in the cost of the kids who have to move? And to Mike's question, one of the first easy costs is the cost of the energy that it takes to get to get the kids from point A to point B. But there are, as a kid, like I said, as a kid who went through it, there's a lot more that goes into the feasibility of choosing a plan depending on how much changes. In other words, the stuff that's only going to build one school is easier than the stuff that's going to build 2. So could you rank each of the feasibility of those? And did you do any cost estimates of the changes?
So right now, the cost estimates are based on the improvements to the building. Those factors have not been considered at this time. We're looking at the variety of options. And so then, listening to tonight and other community feedback, what are some of those other criteria that need to be considered and weighed into feasibility, transportation, and other things we've heard here tonight. Those would be in the next steps and definitely conversations having with the district, because they would be able to weigh more in on those aspects that are non-building related.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you so much. So my question is a bit thinky, but I know that today the open enrollment bill got tabled at State House, but I'm wondering if there's any way you can model or consider if open enrollment were to happen, what you might do differently with the plan. Because I imagine a brand new school might be a pretty great draw if we have open enrollment. And as you know, if they don't move here, we don't get the property taxes that go with it.
I don't know as we can say that without the knowledge of what, until the bill either gets passed or doesn't get passed. I know that We have spoken with the school district about what that may or may not look like, but it's hard to, I know the bill's already kind of gone through a couple of rounds of changes, so it's really hard to define that at this moment.
Yeah, my understanding is I was killed for this term, but that doesn't mean it's not coming back.
Alderman Lopez.
So I was listening to some of my colleagues' comments and kind of reflecting on my own. So first, I want to say if Alderman Dowd gives you an endorsement, it's good enough for me because I was on the Joint Special School Building briefly for him. I was already impressed with Harriman's work in general, but I mean the kind of credibility that he's pointing out is something you can't really just open with because it sounds like you're bragging. So I want that context to be out there as I approach this. But it occurred to me that when I was looking at it, I was kind of wondering why we were looking at options that, in my mind, were already basically close schools and build more, or close schools and don't build more. And where was or just throw money into the buildings we have and hope that it gets better. I wanted to credit the attempt at a capital improvement plan because I think that is probably a paradigm shift. We have acknowledged as a city that we need to do a lot more in school building maintenance and providing the adequate funding to actually make sure these buildings stay in good condition. I don't know that we could have necessarily anticipated structural changes that would have been necessary, like smaller room sizes, particularly for special education. We probably could have predicted that. But a lot of the security changes and those types of things that we might have to do with the onset of school-based violence, you have to be kind of a nightmare imaginer to look at that. So there's some things I think we can predict, and some things I think we just have to be able to react to. And I think ultimately part of this exercise is going to be making sure that if we do tell the city of the people of Nashua that they're going to need to foot the bill for new buildings and new constructions, we better couple that with, and this is how we'll take care of them. So knowing that Harriman does a lot of work with our schools and with surrounding schools, I guess my question is, do you see a preference? Does your company have more experience with building new than remodeling or reconditioning? Would you say it's about even? And then in that context, what do you usually see communities in our situation lean towards?
Great question. I would say we're about 50-50 on both. We have a lot of renovation expansion experience. We also have a lot of new build experience. And it really comes down to when we see a decision being made, it's based on what's right for the community. One of the things I'll point out is when you build a new school, think of it as resetting the clock on all those facility needs. So now it's going to be another 20 to 30 years before you have to do any of the major work to that building. It sometimes helps you rebalance your portfolio so that you can spread out the repair costs going into the future. So you don't necessarily get a restart on a renovation expansion on everything. You do on a lot of things. So there's merit to both approaches. It's really looking at the overall picture and saying, okay, if we were to renovate all these schools, well, what's going to be the timeline? Are we going to have to renovate all of them again in 20 to 30 years? And what does that look like versus if we start to think about maybe replacing some schools, less overall square footage for the district to take care of, what does that look like in regards to the different times you have to think about doing those repairs?
Well,
Yes.
I don't know if it's in the scope of your work. Given your experience, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if, as we start to proceed towards any kind of decision or determination, would you be a part of, or do you think you have the expertise to, advise the school board, really, because I think they have to make the decision about how to do things like rebuilding PTOs or sports teams or groups. If you're making a significant identity change and relocation to a school, what would those costs look like too? Is that something that you have experience with, or is that something we're going to need to just keep in mind and be mindful of?
I don't think we've specifically helped identify the cost of those specific pieces you just mentioned, but I will say that McCarthy is a school that had to rebuild an identity. We were part of that process. We helped the school district where we can, identify colors and team, the team logos, we helped not build the logo, but all these different parts and pieces we were involved
The
with. But
Mustangs.
it's really that's still a community and a school district entity that really decide on like what is the name of the school going to be, what is the mascot going to be, and we need to buy new jerseys and things like that. But yes, we have some familiarity with the process.
Yeah, I'll also mention, we've been involved in projects where they have closed 3 schools and brought them together in a new school. And so they included all of the new schools in determining what is the mascot. They included the community in naming the school. And then we actually built in a display case to honor the history of all 3 schools and their logos, their team accomplishments, all of that. So it honored where everybody came from, but they all worked together to determine that.
Okay, that's encouraging. I'm glad you have at least some experience in that area. I don't know how we ended up with the Mustangs. They're not necessarily native to Nashua, but I'm sure it made sense to the people who were working on it. Thank you.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam President. I haven't said too much because I know the first decision won't be made by us. It'll be by the Board of Ed. So I'm going to take it all in. I'm going to look at the presentation again and study it, and if I have questions, I'll definitely come back. I think, it's the right time to start to think about doing something, just based on budget and based on where things are going. So I'm glad we have multiple options. I think the aldermen here that are most passionate have schools on the list that are probably up for one of those options of being closed down. Including myself, who had one on there. So I think what's going to happen, I think when you look at closing like 5 schools and then building 2, you're going to have people losing their mind out there in the world, mostly because, well, we have 5, why would you build 2? Happens all the time when you think about, well, you have 5 buildings, why would you go and then build brand new ones at whatever cost that might be? We got that same with McCarthy. You have Elm Street, why don't you just renovate it? Why are you building a new school? Well, it's better cost to build a new school. People don't understand that because I still hear it today. The other problem, if you're closing 5 schools, then it turns back over to us. Board of Ed can step away, and now it's us. We got 5 empty schools out there. Well, we still got 1 empty school out there that's coming on 2 years pretty soon, and it's just sitting there. So now we got to try to find a way to do something with 5 empty schools. Or 4 empty schools, or 2 empty schools, or whatever. So the stuff that makes me nervous is what comes next for us here at the Board of Aldermen. So I just want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to thank the Board of Ed and the administration, because I don't envy deciding on this, and maybe I'm still here at the time when we got to make the next decisions, but I do not envy what decision you have to make, because no matter what option you make, someone will be mad at you. So I'm sorry, but thank you for the work you do. I appreciate it. I know it's a hard job, so thank you.
Okay, I'd like to, okay. Alderman Dowd and then Alderman Smith.
Yeah, just 2 things I wanted to point out was, I noticed on your timelines on Nashua High School South, I was on the joint special when we did the 2 high schools, and the only thing left standing at Nashua High South was 1 wall and the staircases. So I would reset that to the same timeline as North, because everything is new in that building.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. The other thing is, if and when anybody builds a new school, there are state and federal standards relative to the class size room and whether you have a kitchen and what the kitchen looks like and what the cafeteria looks like. There are standards that you have to follow. We had discussions numerous times in those standards. So it's just not, you build smaller classrooms and stuff, you can't do that. You're going to have to meet the standards that the state and the federal government set. Thanks.
Alderman Smith?
Thank you. So, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, I wish you did, and I see all the wonderful faces out there of members of the school board, so my heart goes out to you. When I was coming in today, and I was approached by a couple of my constituents, young folks, 2 babies in carriages, 1 toddler walking, and they had a couple questions, not necessarily about this, but about something else. And now I'm just thinking about them and the fact that they relocated to this area and bought a home and are planning on, building their lives here. So I'm just hoping that you're definitely working as close as you can with our school board and that we're looking at, because when I think about the closing of a school, it's like the loss of a loved one. It's pretty significant. It can have and I get, this, it has a serious impact on a community. And we are here trying to make sure we represent and take care of our community. So I'm just hoping that everyone will keep in mind and follow up with those families because, when people relocate to an area, they choose to come here. They do it based on what? Schools, shopping, the mayor, etc. They're bored. But, it's very important, and I keep thinking about them right now and the impact that the closing of any school might have on them. And I'm also hoping that we'll make the smartest decision regarding how we invest our money. No one wants to put money, I think, into a facility that actually we should just completely tear down. If we need to start from the ground up, I think we need to start from the ground up so that we are able to report to our citizens, the best, why we made the decisions that we did, and it was the best at that time. And then we still got to figure out a way to pay for these things so that it doesn't keep falling back on our taxpayers and property taxes. Because my phones are ringing off the hook regarding that. So I just want to encourage everyone to keep doing the work that they're doing and to ask these hard questions. And, for myself being in education over 40 years, I can't see why we have an empty school building when there's so much education that needs to happen. So I hope we will look at ways to utilize these spaces, especially during the transition time. And so I just want to put that back out there for individuals. I don't know about you, but we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need trades folks. What are we doing to train individuals? What are we doing to bring that commerce here? So I'm putting that out there on our educators because you are the ones that help to build these leaders, and we're going to need the facilities to do this. And these are ecosystems we're talking about, and they're going to be data, technology-driven ecosystems. So we just have to get ready for that. The days of, I don't have to worry about chalk dust anymore. I just have to worry about yellow pollen. There's not, blackboards. We're not going to see that. Those are gone. So I really want to make sure that, and I'm hoping that you may not be as smart as me. Well, you might be, but that your designs are brilliant, and so that we are getting the best, for our investment. And I know it's got to be future oriented, but we're trying to plan now for 20, 30 years from now. That's our concern, is that we are trying to plan for that without knowing. So I think we just really need to make sure that the facilities that we're building are prepared to be updated. Like the day we open up the new school, we have to start making the plan for its next renovation. So.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I have to make an attempt to raise my GPA on my slide reading. I have to raise it from.
Don't worry, it's on a curve.
That's good. New Searles was just recently renovated. Shouldn't that have a black dot at 0?
4 for 4.
Ask him about Franklin Street.
Disclaimer at the top that the dots don't include the admin, the secure vestibule renovations.
Yeah.
I don't have that on my slide.
Yes, I think it's.
All right. Oh, I have an old slide.
You just have to go to the left.
So we won't take that into account on my test average. That's it.
Okay. I want to thank you, Jamie and Lisa, for the presentation this evening. It's a lot of information to take in, and I'm going to open it up now for public comment. But I want to thank you for your presentation this evening. So the public comment period, we're not going to be questions and answers. It's going to be a true public comment period. You'll have 3 minutes. Give your name and your town you live in, and you have 3 minutes. So whoever would like to come up first.
Hi, guys. Jen Bishop, Board of Education President, 45 East Dunstable Road, Nashua.
We don't need
I want
that
to
anymore.
thank you guys for listening to the presentations that we've been hearing for the last year and a half, 2 years. The reason that we wanted to bring this to your attention is we can be as thoughtful and mindful and aware as we possibly can be, but without knowing where you guys are and your decisions about what the budget looks like, there is no plan that we're going to make that's going to match our intentions. So in order to bring this to you, we asked Harriman to put it together. We actually were going to have it at our board meeting, but thought it would be better here, because this is kind of like when I tell my kids, what do you want for dinner? You figure it out. I'll pay for it if I agree with what they're ordering, right? So you guys are the purse strings. You guys are the ones that are going to give us the approval that we need to go forward. For us to make the plans that we need to make, we need to understand if you're on the same page that we are. I heard a quote earlier today that was, and it was in regards to the mental health field, but same with public education. People continue to ask to do more with less, and we need to shift it to, we need to do more with greater intention. So what is our intention with what we're providing our citizens? When we think about the kids that you were talking about in our district, in our ward, I'm not so worried about them shifting schools, but are we preparing them adequately for the future? And are our buildings able to sustain that? Are we working at maintaining what we have, which is not ready for 2040? Or are we committed to building our schools in a direction that the kids are going to be graduating and being successful in? So I remember Ms. Johnson always saying, let's go back to pen and paper, let's go back to pen and paper. There's a little
1
bit
minute.
of let's go back to pen and paper. We
She's
need
still
to
doing that.
reconstruct what we're providing.
On brick.
Are we building on brick and mortar that doesn't sustain? It's not a foundation that can be brought into the future. So as you guys are discussing, I hope you continue following our board meetings, but we really need to be on the same page with where we want to go with our students. We have a shrinking enrollment, we have greater need, we have more AI, and we're going to have a multitude of different jobs
30
in the
seconds.
future. I don't like that.
All right.
So let's continue to have these conversations together. Please come and tour our schools, see the difference between what Mount Pleasant looks like and what the brand new middle schools look like, just so you can see the degree of change. Because all of our kids deserve equity. They deserve to leave high school with the same adult opportunities, and we're only going to be able to do that with an adequate education system. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And Heather has all the stats.
Hi, guys. Hi, guys. I'm Heather Raymond. I am the clerk on the Board of Education this year. I also represent Ward 1 up at the State House. There were a lot of questions here about data and enrollment data and other school system data. The Department of Education for the state of New Hampshire has lots and lots and lots of spreadsheets going back 25 years where you can find a lot of it. But I did a deep dive on vouchers and private school enrollment and where our tax money is going recently, so I have a lot of it at my fingertips. Somebody had asked about charter students. There are 6,000 charter students in the state of New Hampshire. 25 years ago, there were 0 because there were no charter schools. About 1,000 of those charter students come from Nashua. We have 3 big charter schools in Nashua. There are 16,000 private school students in the state of New Hampshire. That's down from 24,000 25 years ago, even with vouchers. About 2,900 of the private students in the state come from Nashua. Just interestingly, about 600 of those private school students in Nashua are getting vouchers at a cost of $2.2 million a year. 50 of them, based on the EFA data, came from Nashua school system. And as far as Nashua public schools enrollment, our enrollment is about 9,500 this year. It's down from a peak of 13,000 15 years ago. It was 11,000 8 years ago when I first got on the board. But if you look at all of the data together, we're not necessarily losing kids to charters and private schools. We as a state are losing young people. Like the birth rates are down. The people who are moving into the state tend to be older. They're in their late 30s, and they're not typically people with small children. And I have lots to say about how we can have
development and housing development that would support bringing children in. But the bottom line is, the fewer students we have, the less money we get from the state. And the students that we have, the needs that they have are increasing. So we used to have about 10% of our students qualified for special education. Now it's well over 20%. And as we learned tonight, special education has specific facilities needs that cannot be accommodated in all of our current
30 seconds.
So if anybody else wants any more stats, I have lots of resources. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Right, there's a trend. Rob Johnson, member of Board of Education, Weathersfield Road, Nashua. It's hard when we have to look at schools and say, do we close this school? Do we keep this school open? How do we make those decisions? And I commend Harriman for this report because it's been quite an undertaking. I do wish they left a little space for decisions about schools and what school closes and what school doesn't, so that we as a Board of Education and you as a Board of Aldermen have a little more options to look at, a little more things to consider when we take these things into consideration. As a person who lives near New Searles and who was a PTO member at New Searles and whose children went to New Searles, I would obviously be personally biased, not as a board member, but as a member of the community. And as a one Nashua, I do have concerns about school closing, that I moved to the area to go to have my children at that school. That I moved to the area because of schools, because of parks, because of what was available to them. And now I have two children in college who are excelling because of the education they got at New Searles, at Fairgrounds, at Nashua South. And I commend the Department of Education, and I commend everybody who's contributed to allow these children to grow with these schools. The last thing I'll say is, one thing's about if a school closes in your area, is that your property value will probably decrease. You go from a walking school to having to bus to school. You lose that playground that's down at the school, and you don't know what the future holds, like we've seen with Elm Street. How long would it take for a school like New Searles to sit empty before something is done? How long will it take for Mount Pleasant to sit empty before something is done? How long will it take for Bicentennial to sit empty before something is done? These are things we need to consider, and I thank everyone for their time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Lamphere, and I'm on the Board of Education, and I live at 237 Brook Village Road, Apartment 4. And I just came up because I wanted to point out to everyone on the Board of Aldermen that option B here, it talks about closing Mount Pleasant and sending the children in those schools to Amherst, Birch Hill, Bicentennial, and a couple of other schools, and then the New Searles students would also be broken up into 4 different schools. That isn't ideal, and I think that when we do make any decisions about what we're going to do with these schools, we need to put the needs of the children first, the children and the community. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that if we have issues, the Board of Education, we're going to prioritize the needs of the children above everything else. Another thing to consider is the cost of busing all these kids all over the city. It's not a small amount of money, and if we're going to be saving a small amount of money from closing a school, but then spending a lot of money transporting these kids, plus kind of, really damaging the community, what are we really gaining from that? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The whole board.
My name is Santosh Salvi. I'm a new Board of Education member. I'm definitely going through lots of information in last few months. It's overwhelming for sure, but my concern is right now, when we are building the schools and when we are basically closing any schools, it's going to definitely affect the communities and all. We need to take a look at that, but we also have to come up with a solution where we can compete with the charter school. If we are investing the money, we need to make sure that our regular registration should increase. Because if that number is going down, the cost per student is going to go up. So we need to make sure that how we can increase that and how we can build a school in a way that there will be more students coming to our public school, because both the kids got educated in the public school and they are doing very well, and I strongly trust in the public school. It's an equal opportunity for every kid. They can go to school and they can be whatever they want. But we need to take this decision very seriously. Maybe sometimes it's tough, but we need to make sure that we are working for the general population a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else coming forward. Okay.
Just wait till the board was done.
I think the mayor's circling around here. Is he going to speak?
Chesley Marvin, 10 Marion Lane. I'll keep it PC today. I'm really glad to see that we're having these conversations here at the Board of Aldermen before any decisions have been made on the Board of Ed. I really appreciate these upfront conversations, all the really good questions that are coming from you guys. I worry that like these decisions sometimes would get made behind like closed doors, and then I'll miss, opportunities for public comment and all that stuff. So that's why I usually come and I listen and I like to learn. Anyway, what did I come up here to say? I hear everybody talking about building these newer, better schools and thinking about outcomes for the future and all this awesome technology. And while we do need to be concerned with that, as a parent of 2 kids under 4 years old, what doesn't concern me is that they're, growing up with the technology they'll need for the future. What concerns me is that we're leaving behind the fabric of schools that makes them successful, right? Our charter schools are not stealing students because they have the best smart boards. They're stealing students based on ideologies, right? Kids that are getting outside to play for recess, using your hands to write on pen and paper and those chalkboards everybody's trying to get out of the classrooms for some reason. So I'd say to make good schools, we don't need to build new ones. We need to really focus on the aspects of Nashua that we have that are our bread and butter, that brings value to our communities. These neighborhood schools where kids can walk to school, ride their bikes to school. These are all very healthy things for the brain and help them learn. And then, as a New Cyril's hopeful, right, it does concern me in the Harriman study that my kids could potentially be bused across the highway to one of 4, 2 different schools across the highway, 2 different schools somewhat closer in my neighborhood, and the lack of clarity.
1 minute.
Thank you. Surrounding the potential options for what happens after the school is closed is something that I'd like to see in these discussions a bit more before the decisions are actually made, and we have to essentially live with whatever the outcome is. So if there's a way for the Aldermen and the Board of Ed to continue to work together on discussing, okay, well, if we have these favored options, hopefully that's keeping them all open. But say we did want to close a school, what do we imagine as a city that looks like?
30 seconds.
And we should be thinking about the benefit we're returning to that community when we take something away. As a community member, I love the holistic view before I can really weigh in on it. And until I have that perceived benefit to the city and to our students, if you take something away from them, what are they getting back for it? I would not be in support of closing any schools. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Keeps trolling you by
very
walking
quick. I know
back.
everyone wants to get out of here. But I just wanted to kind of speak
Name
to the...
and-
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Name and
Eric
town.
Osliff, 22 Marion Lane. I'll be brief, like I said. I just wanted to bring some transparency to, and maybe some perspective and context to the data that you saw tonight. This is the third version of the Harriman study that I've seen. And I'll just be, again, transparent that I'm here to advocate for New Searles. I'm here to speak to some of the details around New Searles and how it's positioned in their repair cost analysis. So specifically, if you look over that analysis and evaluate it yourself, New Searles comes out at $146 per square foot at a total cost of $8.3 million, right? I think I heard it confirmed tonight, and this was my knowledge beforehand too, that that did not account for a $1.8 million security vestibule investment that was completed in September and I think paid for a couple of months ago. I think you mentioned that in one of the last meetings recently. So $1.8 million, again, we're doing something theoretically here, kind of retroactively, but deducting $1.8 million from an $8.3 million total gives you about $6.5 million. That brings the New Searles average to $114 per square foot, right? That puts it, and I'm saying this with the realization in the data that the repair cost per square foot and the total cost drives the recommended options, A through E. New Searles is on the chopping block in two of those options. In my opinion, it's wrongly on the chopping block. If the data is not current, and I understand that they did these evaluations at a time when maybe they didn't account for the security vestibule, so I'm kind of saving room for that. But like I alluded to, this is the third version of this study. Perhaps there was an opportunity to make that point very transparent in the data. Perhaps there was an opportunity to do a reevaluation on some of the schools that maybe necessitated it. So I want to point this out because I think it's important to scrutinize this, to think critically about it, and to just be well informed about
1 minute.
how that repair cost positions these schools, and it's consequential, right? New Searles is, I think, wrongly on that chopping block list. I don't think it should be there based on the data that should be current in this presentation. So I just wanted to call attention to that and just overall advocating for the school and for everyone to look at this with very clear eyes and scrutiny. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we will close the public comment period. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you a question, Madam President. I wanted to make sure in the future that any meeting that we have that is a presentation, have public comment at the end, please. I think we've been very, true transparency would have been that every person in the city or every ward in the city knew that this meeting was going to happen tonight with public comment, because I could have brought in plenty of Ward 8 people fighting for Bicentennial, and I know Alderman Clee could have brought in probably the whole ward to fight for Mount Pleasant. So I think it's important that, I think we're not always consistent with public comment. Instead of having to almost backdoor it into a meeting, I prefer to have it on the agenda, so that when we send out the agendas and we put it on the website, that it's clearly on there, people know we have public comment and they can come and speak. I think it's important. I think the way it was done tonight wasn't the way we should do it. It should always be on the agenda for any meeting that's in this chamber, committee meeting, or special Board of Aldermen. I'm hoping we can do that going forward. Thank you.
We're done. I am looking for a motion to adjourn. That was Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I make the motion to adjourn.
By roll call. Motion to adjourn by roll call, please.
Alderman Ravan.
Yes.
Alderman Smith. Alderwoman Smith.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow's a yes. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes, please.
Alderman Senate.
No.
Alderman Johnson.
No.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Morgan.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
No.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
And we have enough to close the meeting, so we're adjourned.
We're adjourned at 9:08 PM. Thank you, everyone.